on. So, and a great pleasure to have you as a guest and to have time for us and share your wisdom with, we'll start with putting today and short game in January. And I'll let you introduce yourself and your background, but what a pleasure, and thank you very much for doing this for us.
Oh, no problem. And thank you for organizing this here and putting it together. So, and it'll be great because, you know, I'm sure a lot of you I haven't met before. So it'll be great to kind of go through that there. So when we were discussing this here, we wanted to do something that wasn't just so technically based, so that you could think about your coaching and your instructing a little bit differently. So our goal, obviously, we're going to have some technical stuff today, but you know, our goal here is to make us as coaches a little bit better. I've certainly made lots of mistakes, so you can certainly learn from some of the things that I've done wrong, but also some of the things that I've done right. And I'm going to share with you. I've been lucky enough. I've actually worked with 4 world number ones on the LPGA tour. And it was good because I got to see, bar one of them, I got to see all of them come from, you know, either a rookie on tour all the way up to become a world number 1 player. So I've got to see that, what that trajectory looks like, you know, and we often get players and we think, you know, they're a scratch handicap, and you're thinking, how do I get them to a +1 or a +2? And here we have players who are, you know, already +5 and they're going to +8 as pros. So there's always room to get better, but it might not be exactly the way you thought about it going forward, you know, because I think we all think that we just have to make the technique a little bit better and then everything else will be pretty good. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. So yes, I don't have a Canadian accent. I'm from Ireland originally, and I was I tried to play professionally after I graduated university. I moved over to Canada, played Canadian tour, went down and played nationwide tour. It would have been at the time. Did a lot of coaching at that stage, just with players that I was out there on tour, you know, and I kind of had a bug for coaching anyway, you know. So it was great because some of the first things that I ever did as a coach was actually working with, I'm going to step back a little bit, was actually working with really good players. So, you know, a lot of people start, you know, with the beginners and stuff. I started with, you know, pros, tour pros, people that I was playing with. So it was really good. And I suppose for me, you know, I got into the short game because, you know, I don't think I was the best ball striker. So, but I understood and I taught myself how to become a good putter. I certainly wasn't a good putter to begin with. And I certainly wasn't good with wedges and chipping and all, but, you know, through trial and error, I kind of started to coach myself and started to understand how to improve that there. So when I was, 2009 here, I was in Canada, just starting really my career here. And I had just down the road there, probably only an hour away, was Sean Foley, who Sean's worked with so many great players, Tiger included. And there was a bunch of other really great swing instructors. And I thought, boy, if I'm just starting now and they're already here, it's going to take me years and years to actually get to their level. So how could I accelerate my coaching so that I could be, you know, wanting to coach some of the best players? So the big thing I thought about was, well, I have to be different. You got to be different in some way. So for me, it was deciding that short game and putting was going to be a specialty for me. So I ended up spending all my time, all my study time, looking up some of the best short game coaches, and then going to players and basically spending time with players and saying, how do you hit this shot? And how do you do this? And what are you thinking about here? And then backtracking all of that information and trying to actually come up with some really good short game stuff. And it was really cool at the time because everybody was just teaching, you know, but nobody really decided they were going to specialize in anything. So it made my progression very fast. So, you know, it was only a couple of years and I had a couple of tour pros. So it was really good. Now at that stage, I still didn't know half the stuff I know now, but at the same time, it jumped and elevated me up a notch. Now, a lot of you guys just, you're working the clubs and stuff, and that's how I started. I started, in 2010, I started a club called Riverbend Golf Community. It was here in London, and I'm still there. 11 years on, it's just been a great club. And it was interesting when I started at the club, the pro at the time said, nah, they're not going to take lessons. They don't want coaching. They don't want to do that stuff. You're wasting your time. I was like, okay, well, let me try. And within 2 years, I was doing about 1,200 lessons in the summertime. And in about 4 years, I couldn't teach anymore. I was fully booked every hour. And then that started to snowball into better players coming to see me too, who I didn't know. And then I just, when people would come to me, they would look for full swing right away. And we're going to talk about assessments here in a minute. And I would say, well, why don't we actually look at what you want? Do you want to get better and shoot lower scores? Or do you want me to work on your swing? And inevitably most people say, well, I just want to shoot lower scores, whatever that might look like. So for me, it was taking people right away and getting putting better, chipping better, pitching better. And all of a sudden, these people, their handicaps were just plummeting. And that obviously made my business just grow faster and faster, because, the average player was, 15 handicap. Now this, 1 year later, there are 5, and people are going, what's the difference? And their ball striking really didn't change. We didn't do that much of it. It was all just, based on the short game. So, you don't need to, obviously, to get out and you want to aspire to be out working with the best players, you've kind of got to train yourself in the environment that you're in. And for me, it was so good because I just had my members and people who would come to see me. So I got to learn all of this here stuff. And then in 2014, that's when I started kind of working regularly on tour. I started with a young girl on the LPGA tour called Jane Park. And Jane doubled her money on tour when she started working with me. And another girl, Tiffany Joe, on the LPGA tour, she doubled her money working with me. And then 2016, I worked with a couple of Thai players, the Jutanagirns from Thailand. Area used to be the world #1, her sister Moria as well. So I started with her when she was like 66th in the world. And about 6 months later, she was #1 in the world. In 2018, I started with Jin Young Ko. She was a rookie on tour. By the mid 2019, she was the world #1. So I'm going to share with you today some of the things that I did to help those players move up the ranks. And hopefully it's going to be interesting for you. Like I have it on there, I was the Teacher of the Year in Canada for 2018 and 2020. Actually 4 world #1s that I've coached. If anybody's followed me on social, I started my own line of training aids. If you can see it here, there's one of them on the floor. It's a putting mat. And, it was just, you get all this stuff and you're like, I just want to have some better products that I could coach with. So I started designing them and making them, and I got a company to partner with. So it's been kind of fun doing that. I opened an academy in Ireland, which is doing fantastic, based around short game and putting and performance. And then I just recently opened up a design company. A couple of golf courses reached out to me and said, hey, we're designing our short game area. We've got architects that we wanted to design for us, but the committees couldn't decide on the architect's designs. And I came in and I just started showing them some ideas. I said, well, if you're a coach, this is what you want to have at your golf course. You want to have this bunker here, and you want to be able to teach here, and you want to have this clinic over here. And I showed them how to do this here. And then all of a sudden there was multiple clubs saying, oh, I want you to design ours for us too. Which is really important, because if you think about it, architects really only care about one thing, which is the golf course. That's their bread and butter. They need to get the golf course right. But as coaches here, they kind of throw in the chipping area and a bunker, maybe if you're lucky, and the putting green. And there's really no thought to it. It's just like, where can we just place these things? So what I really want to change in the next, 5 to 10 years is the clubs actually start to provide the necessary training environment for golfers, so that as coaches like us, we can go out and we can really help these players. We have driving ranges, which obviously we can do tons at, but we just don't have enough for around the short game. So I think this design part is going to be kind of really fun for me. So you can see I'm kind of involved, and I'm involved with another company. We're doing a putter design with Scott Cokes, who most of you probably know. We're helping brand a new putter company. So again, you know, I think when you're in golf and you just love golf, you just love doing lots of things around it, you know. So for me, that's kind of what I've really enjoyed. So that's a little bit about me. So let's dive in here. And this is kind of what we're gonna kind of cover today. I really want to not just share theory, but I want to share some of my experiences and tell you some of the things that I think that have gone well for me, and maybe some of the mistakes that I've made that maybe you could possibly learn from and improve on as well. So this is what we're going to do today. So when I think about information, and certainly when we've got the internet now, like we have an abundance of information, you know. And I see this here when I have good players come to me, you know, and college players, you know, and they're always they're talking so much information, but they're not actually applying that information well, you know. So they've got great ideas, great thoughts, and you know, as coaches, we're training ourselves all the time to get more and more information so that we can be more valuable. But one of the things that I found that was really helpful for me was I tried to write down all of the things that I believe were true, or what I thought was actually something that would be useful for players. I heard this here from, it was a FIFA, it's a company in France that does this, and their specialty is working with FIFA soccer coaches, football coaches. And they basically take the coach and he comes in and they go through all of his belief systems and all of the things that he thinks is true. And they basically say, where did you hear this? Where does this come from? And they went deeper into what they're actually teaching. And they end up finding that a lot of the stuff that they were coaching was just stuff that they had heard from someone else. You know, oh, I seen so-and-so doing that, so I started coaching that format and I started doing this here. Instead of kind of doing your own research to figure out what's the right thing and what's the wrong thing to be working on. So when I think about this here, this is a good exercise, and it's one of the things that I think really helped me was, you know, to write down what your beliefs are around playing the game and playing it well. You know, do you need to be a long hitter? You know, can you get away with being a good putter and being short off the tee? You know, should you be more aggressive? You know, there's so many things that go into playing this game. And if you write down the things that you believe are important in terms of actually to play well, and then you ask yourself, if you're a golfer yourself and you play a lot, am I doing these things? You know, the biggest thing that I see is that we've got this list of things that we believe are going to be good for players, and then we see what the actual action is, and the action is probably the least thing that's happening. So we know what we need to do, we know how we want to play, but we're not really taking the action steps to actually make the improvement, you know, or we're just getting jumbled ideas. We have too much stuff going on. So, and often we have biases, you know, like as players, we all have biases, you know, like I'm probably going to always lean towards short game, you know, where another instructor is going to say, no, you need distance off the tee. You got to have distance. No, you've got to be a great iron player. You know, the stats would show that probably your iron play is probably the biggest thing, and distance, you know. But, you know, I think when you go out and you set a target and you say, okay, this is what I believe in playing the game. Does my coaching match that type of philosophy? And then when you think about, you know, coaching like juniors or adults or ladies or pros or beginners, you know, what way do you approach that? You know, is a junior different than an adult versus a ladies versus a pro versus a beginner? Instead of just kind of having an idea in your head of what it is, why don't you write out what way you would teach a junior to get the best out of them, and what's the most important thing. So for instance, my juniors, some of the ones that I have that are 12 or 13, our main goal is to make as many mistakes as possible. So our job in training, in practice, in play, is to make as many mistakes as possible, because they will then start to understand what the right way is to do it. And as we keep doing it, what happens is that we make less mistakes, and we make less mistakes. Even though we're trying to make mistakes, we make less mistakes, because there's something called neuroplasticity, where basically as kids are the most malleable. Like they can take information on and absorb stuff at a level that an adult couldn't do, you know? So when we're working with adults, it's a very different thing that we're trying to do there compared to juniors. Obviously, adults are coming with a much different set of rules, because their brain has kind of formed its patterns, and it's you think of our brain as sort of like neurons. So when we want to do something, if I wanted to chip a ball or something, the neurons would fire, and I'd be able to do that there. Kids just pick that up, and it just rewires their brains so fast, because nothing's really set in stone. As adults, it's kind of set in stone. So if you didn't, as a kid, if you didn't run, jump, throw, skip, like play a lot of ball sports, some of those skills are going to be hard for you to adapt as an adult, you know? And I think when you're going to teach an adult, one of the best things to do is just take one thing and just stick with that one thing until they've actually done it. If you go and you tell an adult, I want you to make a ton of mistakes, as adults, we don't like that, because we're going to feel embarrassed. We're going to feel, oh, I don't want to make a bunch of mistakes. I already feel nervous because you're coaching me. I need to now think about how I want to coach that adult so that they're going to feel comfortable with me and then improve. If it's ladies, probably one of the big things, ladies love information. You know, they like things, like they love to know the whys about things. So they are much more where the men are just like, tell me what to do. Okay, that's it. But you don't want to override them. But the women really like to know a bit more information about that. Pros are interesting because pros like things simple, like extremely simple. So one of my jobs, what I did is I wrote out, let's just say it was putting. I wrote out putting, and I'm like, how could I explain putting that has science behind it, but is so simple that a 8-year-old would understand? So I went and I took a pro and I said, okay, I want to teach them how to do whatever. It could be grip, it could be posture, but how could I teach that person like they're an 8-year-old? Because what we're trying to achieve with the pros is an ability to adapt a new skill or movement pattern. And if it's simple and the information is simple, then the pro is much easier to do it. Like I remember first couple of times you get out and you get to teach a really good player, and you know, it's like verbal diarrhea. You're just like blah, 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 because you're trying to tell them all this really cool stuff and you're trying to share with them all the things that you know, but that's not really going to help the player. What you're trying to do is validate yourself that you know the information. Players, good players don't want that. They want to be able to say, here, this is something I think would be good for you to improve. This is how you could go about improving it. End of story. You know, you don't have to keep going on, you know? So I think I've had a lot of success with the pros because of this exercise of physically writing down how I want to teach these people. And obviously beginners are a whole new thing. You know, they're just so nervous and intimidated that if you could create a rapport with them and you could get them to feel comfortable, they're probably going to come back and improve. You know, in one session or two sessions, you're probably not seeing too much difference, to be honest with you. So for them to become long-lasting clients, we've got to create a comfort factor, you know? So, you know, I always tell stories all the time. I always try and, you know, this is what I was like when I was beginning. I've seen this before with other players beginning, and you're kind of they're hearing things that they're thinking about already. You know, oh, he was really nervous and he wasn't sure about joining the club, or he wasn't sure about taking up golf. And you go through all of this stuff. And when you get a player in front of you, whether they're junior, adult, ladies, or pro or beginner, you really know how to coach them. You know what you're going to tell them. How you're going to talk to them. You know, if you're talking with kids, you know, you might be down at eye level, and tone is so important. Like, I think about when I'm talking to people who are too aggressive, I will go the opposite way, and I'll go very quiet, and other people will not want to talk at all. So you have to be the life and soul of the party. So as coaches, we have to adapt to all these different things, because if we don't do that then the player won't take to us. And if they don't take to us, the information that we have is useless. Even if our information is the best information in the world, if the player doesn't come to us and feel comfortable in our presence, it doesn't matter. So all the schooling that we're doing and all their education won't make any difference unless we have taken that there step to see if we could actually make a rapport with the player. So the other thing is that when we're working with people to, what would you consider yourself? Are you an instructor or are you a coach? And they're quite different, When I think we all start out as instructors, to be honest with you. So when we're beginning, we're all starting out and we're learning this game and we're teaching people, and like, okay, your grip and your setup, and that's just how we evolve. But as a coach, what we're looking for is, what is the best way to get this player better, but not just through the technical lens. We're looking at absolutely everything. It could be fitness. It could be literally going out on the golf course with the player and say, let's go out and play 9 holes and see if I can help you out there. Because there's a good chance if you go out on the golf course with a player and you just give them a couple of suggestions of how to play the game a little bit better, their score is going to come down quite a bit. Because the truth is that the science behind actually improving is, like we talked about neuroplasticity, is that how well you learn, and if you're a good learner, you can take players and make them better very quickly, but you can take that same player in the same situation who's just not malleable enough, and it will take them so much longer to improve. So if you're saying, well, we need to break your swing down and do this and do that, then all of a sudden what you're going to do is you're going to see a big dip in their play, and it will take a long time for that to come out on the other end. So we've got to be thinking a little bit broader about, and certainly this is what I do, think a little broader about what we're actually trying to get out of our players, and not just think technique. So the first thing I think about is, how can I get this player better with making the least amount of steps? So when I think about a tour pro, okay, how do I get this player to go from being 50th in the world to top 20 in the world, where my influence on them is very small, or their ability to take what I have and turn it into an actionable thing is quite easy. Like that's the secret there, as opposed to, because we can look at anybody and go, yeah, I don't like their position, I don't like their hands, I don't like the way they're doing that there. We can do that with absolutely everybody. But is that really going to make a difference? So we also need to educate, like I have here, educate the student to ask better questions. Like when you're working with a player, especially young players. So my rule with young players is, you must come to the session with a question. And after the session's done, you must ask a question, because there's a lot of kids and a lot of young people, and a lot of, like, I'd say everybody who have a bit of shyness in them, who just, they don't know what to ask. But we have to start the process of getting them to ask questions, because as they start to develop, the difference between them getting better and staying the same could be just asking different questions. Because if they're asking questions, they're thinking ahead about what they're doing and actually starting to improve and starting to work towards a goal. So make it a priority for the players to ask questions. And the interesting thing about better players and pros is that they always ask questions. always asking, hey, what about this here? What if I did this here? Tell me about that, you know? So this is a common thread that we see with really good players, is that they ask a lot of questions. And I remember working with Lydia Ko, and this just shows you when we go back to working, when we talk about the best ways to improve. So I'm working with Lydia and we're on the putting green, and we're doing like a really simple speed drill. You know, I said, I looked at her and kind of did my assessment and went, okay, here's what I think we should work on. And it was kind of just like the starting point. I'm like, here's the starting point. I just want to work on this one little thing just for a few minutes and then we'll move on. And she says, no, I think this is really good. I says, let's spend the whole hour working on this one thing. And I'm thinking, wow, and this seems like crazy. I was only going to do this for like 2 minutes, you know? But that's what good players do. They recognize things that they like and want to work on, and they will spend all of their time working on that one thing. And that one comment taught me so much about the players, and especially good players, is that, you know, rookies on tour are going to be totally different. When I get a rookie on tour, they're asking me 50 different questions, and their mind is just so messed up. They're so jumbled in so many other ideas and thoughts, and they're trying to do too much. Where you take someone like Lydia Ko, and she's like, oh, I like that one idea. Let's spend the whole day and the whole week and the whole month working on that one idea, because I think that one idea is going to be good, and I'll be able to turn it into something that's actionable, and I'll develop that skill even better, and then I'll improve. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. You know, I think for years I probably overcoached too many players, and when you get a good player and they can start to do that there, then it shows a lot. So when we're working through this here, you know, diagnosis, figuring out what the player needs to do, information, you know, obviously we all want to give information, but if there's no information and the application doesn't go, so if they don't take that information and be able to do something with it, then it's very hard to transfer the information that we have in our brains over to the players. Then ownership is probably the next biggest thing. So the player, if you ask them about some of their thoughts and some of their theories, they will tell you basically what you've taught them. They will actually, okay, this is what you're thinking. So I remember I was at the Canadian Open with Jin Young Ko, and Jin Young, it was a great tournament. She ended up winning the tournament. She went bogey free for the whole week. And it was interesting because we were out there and we were just, you know, we would get out around the green and she'd be chipping and doing different things. And she'd look at the lie and she goes, so this is how I play this shot. I'm like, okay, perfect. She goes, okay, so this is how I play this shot. And she goes, okay, great. And she goes, the sand's a little bit like this. So this is how I would do this here. And it just kept going on all day. So what happened there is that my information she was applying it, but now she'd fully owned it. Like she owned the information. And because she owned the information, she could then execute the information. She obviously went bogey free the whole week. And that was the first time that I had realized that the information that I had given her had turned into her information. We had transferred over that piece. And once I knew we had transferred over that piece, then, you know, then she was off to the races. Technically, she could fire me at that stage because she's already got all the stuff, you know. But that's what we're trying to do as coaches. We're trying to get from what should we work on to they know what to work on, how to work on it, they own it. And it's funny, I remember a young pro came up to me one day and they're like, oh, I had the greatest idea. I think I should do this and this and this. And I'm like, oh yeah, where did you hear that? She goes, oh, I just came up with it myself. And then I sent them a paper that I had wrote on this exact topic. And they're like, oh, I heard it from you. But it just, you know, they had heard the information and they had turned it into their own little spin and thought it was theirs and then actually ran with it. So I think that's what happens a lot of times. And that's kind of what we're hoping will happen so that we can then get the player to the execution stage. Because at the end of the day, we've got to get them performing. We've got to have the players performing well. So I want to, I kind of talked a little bit about that there. I'll hammer through that there. So we've got time here. So learning a new skill. So I want to share with you here just a couple of videos. And these are some of my players. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is that the players that I coach, when they come down the stretch and they have to play well, they tend to play well. And I'm going to tell you why I think that is. So this is Area Jutanagaran. By the way, she makes this putt, wins the tournament, and now becomes the world number one. Playing in the final group on the final hole, and to go ahead and to make that putt. So when I think about coaching players, I think about, is the work that we're doing with them right now going to allow them to stand up when they need to go out and make a big putt like that, make a big putt to try and win a tournament. Let's see if I can move this here now. Oh, sorry, folks. So this is Jin Young Ko. We'll see if we can get it to play for you. So I want you to watch. This is the final round. I want you to watch the speed that the ball is traveling into the hole. Now, this is a really interesting one here. Misses a fairly good chance. And I think about this here, and this is something that we've coached the players in, is that when a player misses, have you coached them enough that they know how to bounce back? They know what to do in that situation, even if things have kind of gone wrong. So she's made a bit of a mess there. Let that one get away. And it's very easy at that stage to sort of let everything go away. So she's tied for the lead here with nine to go. And let's move this on. And again, watch the speed that the ball is traveling into the hole. That's very, very important. And it's a skill that we've worked on quite a bit. So that was for par. So that just keeps her hanging on there. And again, this is down the stretch. Again, look at that weight that the ball is going into the hole. That's not by accident. That is something that is specifically being trained. And then I'll just move up. One of the things that we spent a lot of time on was wedges as well. I know we're talking putting today. To be able to control your wedges, to take advantage of scoring opportunities. Again, when we look at trying to get players better, we have to look at what's going to make the difference. Again, watch the ball going into the hole here. And Jin Young does not have the best stroke, You would definitely not say that she's got the best stroke, but what she does is obviously sticks to her routine. That's another wedge shot, and we're going to talk about wedges next week, but you'll see that perfect control of distance, and we're going to talk about that there a little bit more in the next session. And again, you'll see here the speed that the ball is going into the hole. And it's interesting, if you look at this here, if you look at that there, she's not lined up. We can run that back again. If you look at that line there, she's actually not lined up correctly to her line, but she still makes it. So let me just move it forward here. So coming into the final hole, and the winner here gets $1 million. So she has this putt for the win on a big stage to win $1 million. So we think about coaching. I think about how do I get the player to do that more often? See if I can move this forward for us. Sorry. There we go. So when we think about coaching on tour, a couple of things that kind of jump out at me is that, especially good players, less is more. If we can do a little bit less in terms of the work, we can probably get a little bit more, but we have to be very specific about the work that we're trying to achieve. Language is super important here. So if you go out and you talk over a player's head with too many technical terms, especially a good player, they're going to run away. Like, they are not going to want to have anything to do with it. So when we're talking with better players or any player, the language that we use is extremely important so that the player actually gets better. Consistency is super important because we want the player to feel as comfortable as possible. So when we set up our warm-up routine for the day, we actually have our warm-up routine built into our drills. So when we warm up for the day, we do exactly the same things. When I'm showing up on site to work with the player, it looks almost the same week in and week out. That consistency allows the player to know that you're not jumping around with a million ideas, but they also feel a sense of comfort when they're around you, and that will actually get them to perform a little bit better. Planning is another one. All of my sessions are planned. Every time I work with a player, it's usually in blocks of an hour. I know exactly what I'm doing down to probably every sort of 4 to 5 minutes. I've got it all planned out, exactly what we're doing. So player shows up, okay, let's go. Here's the first exercise, here's the second exercise, here's the third exercise. It's kind of a bit more like a personal trainer than it is a teacher, instructor, so it's much more organized. And then obviously that comes back to the level of training. If we train and I know a player, let's just say inside 6 feet, I know that they're holding out at 8 out of 10 times, in practice. So I would expect that to transfer over. If they're, 7 out of time, 5, and it's jumping around, I would expect their performance on the golf course to kind of mimic the same thing, and it would be a little bit all over the place. So we can take the training and actually really train them hard without a ton of information and actually get them to improve quite a bit. So again, when we're thinking about putters, what are the characteristics of a great putter? When I was thinking about, when I'm coaching these players, because I made the mistake the first time I got on tour, I was super technical. I made sure everybody had, the right grip, the right setup, the right posture, head positions, everything had to be exactly right. And it was good, it was useful, but it really didn't take that player to that next level. A lot of times what I'd find is the player would play well, and then the next week with all the same work, they would just play poorly. So I really wasn't coaching the player. I was just coaching the look, the aesthetics. I was just making sure that they looked in the right position so that they could play well, but that wasn't really the big characteristic there. So again, like we talk about consistency, whether it's your routine showing up to the golf course or whether it's your routine over the ball, those are key things that are going to obviously make a difference. So that's what that repetitive stuff, like when we talk about neuroplasticity and the brain and how the brain adapts, if we really want it to be good at repeating, we have to be repetitive. We have to do the same thing over and over and over again. And I think as teachers, and I know me as a younger one, I almost felt self-conscious when I was with the player and they're like, okay, what next? And I'm like, no, there's no next. This is it. This is what you're doing now for the next hour. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to create that link between your brain and your body so that you can repeat that there. And the only way to do that there is to be repetitive over and over and think the same way every single time. So that there was one of the keys that we did, making them become good decision makers and good thinkers, so that you're going out there and you're training them to think and to be decisive and know what they want to do. And part of the coaching is actually figuring that out too. Imagination, we do that all the time, whether you're standing on a tee or whether you're putting. I want them to imagine what that looks like. I want them to start to visualize that, whether we have to put stuff on the ground or whether they can just do it visually. Like, we want to start to train that with our players. Obviously, you can't be a good putter unless you're reading the greens well. So that's a given. Good touch and feel. I do so much speed work with the players. It's unbelievable. You wouldn't believe how much we spend time just working on speed. And if you've seen the videos there of Jin Young, that ball is going into the hole the same way. And we're going to talk a little bit later why that is. And then repeatable patterns, like that's, even if the stroke or even if the motion is different, does it repeat? I've seen players before, players come for their putting, and I'm looking at them going, oh, that doesn't look good at all, but boy, are they good putters. So they have a highly repeatable pattern. And if we go and try and change that pattern, the likelihood of them performing well is 50-50. You're really rolling the dice there because they already have something that is highly repeatable, which is really what we're looking for. We just have to build around that skill, or let that one be and move on. It's kind of like, if you think of Jim Furyk, like most people will look at Jim Furyk and say, well, we've got to change his swing, but he has a pattern that is highly repeatable. So when we're looking at players, we want to look a little deeper than just sort of, are they aesthetically pleasing? And then the other thing is, do they perform well under pressure? So are you stressing your players out enough to see if they can handle pressure? So I remember I was at, where was I? I was at Evian in France, and I was with one of the players, and I set up an exercise, and I set up the exercise to create success. So it was 6 foot, I think it was 6 foot, and they had 9 putts, and I put them on fairly straight putts, or like inside the hole, and they're 8 out of 9 putts. And then what I did is I took the same 6 putts and I moved them into really hard slopey spots. They didn't realize that I was just randomly moving them around, and then they scored like 4 out of 9. And now they're starting to stress out about their putting. They're starting to stress out, oh my God, something's wrong. I need to fix this here. So what we need to do is learn to stress the players out so that they actually improve. This player, after we taught them kind of why we were stressing them out and how their body had totally changed, because we went and did the same exercise over with a fairly easy putt and significant change. So it was like 6 out of 9. So they got worse because of that second set that we stressed them out, and they didn't know how to control their body to take it to the next set, and that changed their performance, and that's why the performance dipped. Now we would be watching them going, oh, they missed all these putts, but they didn't really miss the putts. We have to look a little deeper and think, okay, they were stressed out in that moment. They didn't know how to manage it. So we have to, as coaches, we have to figure out ways to stress the player out so that they can manage it a bit better. And the more we keep doing it, the more they become used to stressors, because you don't get rid of stressors, you just get used to them, and then you're able to manage it a little bit better. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's talk about one of the most important things when a new player comes to you, or you're just looking at your player and you're wondering why are they not getting better. So I think so much of coaching and teaching in the past is, okay, let me hit a few shots or hit a few putts, and then we're diving right in with information. We've looked at it. Okay, well, let's just change that there. This needs to be done. This needs to be done, as opposed to thinking, why don't we just produce an assessment plan so that we get a really good idea of what the player is actually strong at and what the player is weak at. If we know what they're strong and weak at, we can actually start to build a plan and a strategy to get them better. Because here's the thing, if you jump in and you say, okay, let's work on this here, and all of a sudden it's wrong, or it's a slower process to improvement, that quick jump into that information is going to slow down the whole process. They might leave you, they might just take forever to get better. It slows everything down. So just slowing everything down at the beginning so that you can take more information in, so that you can figure out, does this player actually, what are they good at, And then when you're doing this assessment plan, you have to think about, well, what do I want to measure? Like what's an important test here when we're looking at putting? I think you'll automatically, I'm going to show you in a minute, you'll automatically go to, setup and, stroke and all the other things, but there's some other things that could be really good, And the other thing about when we measure something and we quantify it, it's just a fact. Here's a fact of where you are today. If I do it in a month, here's where you are in a month. That difference, showing a player, here's where you were and here's where you are, has a massive impact emotionally on their psyche, because they feel like they've just gone straight up. They feel like they're on a massive trajectory going forward, and they feel like they're getting better. The worst thing with players and players who struggle to come to me, they say, I feel lost. I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what I should be working on. I'm working hard, but I'm not getting any better. So these are things that we often hear. Now, I use Capto, I use Sam Putt Lab, I use GC Quad. I use so many different tools to help me gather information about the player's putting. But I only share maybe one or two of those things that I think are important. So like when I have screens and things up, I don't let players see any of that stuff, because I don't see the value in it. And they're often say, oh, can I see all these? I'm like, no, I'm not going to show you that there, because it doesn't do us any good. If you know that there's 10 things wrong, that doesn't do you any good. Where if I tell you, here's one thing that I'd like you to improve, this is what we can work forward to. So when we're using that information, I will use it and scan it and look through it. And even after the session, I'll look through it and I'll find things after an assessment that I didn't see with the player because we're busy doing stuff at that time. And then we can actually put a plan in place. So I think setting up a session where you're coming in and just assessing the player as opposed to giving them a ton of information is really, really key, because then you can start to make a plan for them. And that's where coaching is different to instructing. Guy comes for instructing, okay, I'm coming over the top, okay, here's what you need to do. Where coaching is much more a relationship and more of a long-term thing. So when we're looking at our kind of a discovery plan, and we're just looking at some of the technical things, you're looking at, can they read a green? Can they control their speed, start the ball on line? Is a consistent routine? How do they present themselves? Do they look nervous? These are things that I'm thinking about during that discovery phase as I'm trying to figure out what the player actually is doing. And this is a simple assessment plan that I have, and I'll alter it. And I use a couple of different apps. I use the Spider app too sometimes, and it's an app on the phone, and you can kind of do all this here on your phone, so it's quite handy. But it gives me sort of the distance of the putt, how much slope. You can see at number 2 there, it's a 1% slope to the left. So that's how we mark it down, obviously miss or make. And then we're seeing, your aim, your speed, your line, all of these different characteristics that we can actually track in, even if it's just 10 putts. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll break it down into, inside 5 feet, 5 feet to 10 feet, 10 feet to 15 feet, and they may hit, 30 or 40 putts in an assessment. But the great thing is once they've done that there, you're going to be able to see, well, how many times did they miss because of aim or speed or line? What were the key factors there? Because when you look at it, you might go, God, their stroke looks terrible. Like I don't love the way it looks. But when you do the assessment, if it comes out that their reading is terrible, well, you could go and work on the reading of the greens and improve them, as opposed to what you would originally think of, okay, well, let's just go completely technical, let's go and totally change. So just keep it, I think. totally change everything here. So this is one of the things that I like to do. And then while I'm doing that, what I'll often look at is their routine. So within that area, are they doing the same routine? I'll time it. I'll time every routine and I'll put down how much the time it takes. And what we're looking for is a fairly quick time. Like if you were watching the video that I showed you of Eva Area or Genio, what you'll notice is that when they're setting up, they will look back and go. That's something that is being trained into them to have that type of, so their speed and their timing is exactly the same every time. Because you know yourself, you've seen all the players, they're standing up like this here, and they're looking up a couple of times, they're stuck in this position, you know, and at that stage, they're never going to usually make it as good a stroke as they possibly could. So as you're doing this here, you're taking notes of their body and how they're behaving. So when I go and watch a player and I'm watching them, and I remember I was standing with a mother once and she said to me, the player just missed, she goes, oh, that was so close. And she goes, oh, you're not even reacting. I'm like, it was like 25 feet from the hole. She wasn't supposed to make it. Like statistically, that is not a putt that you're going to make. You know, if she made that, they're probably a little bit more on the luck side than the skill side. So when we're looking at the players, what I'm really paying attention to is their behaviors, how they're acting, how they're walking, and then I'm timing them, you know? And what I'm looking for is consistent routines, consistent times, and consistent behaviors. You know, I often tell the kids that Rory McIlroy could intimidate players with his walk. You know, you can see he's just got this kind of like, Dustin Johnson too, you know, kind of long and lazy. Like those are the things that you're looking at from a performance standpoint as a coach, because it's so easy to look and go, oh, they pulled it to the left, or they did this, or they did that there. But I want to look a little bit deeper and think, okay, what are they actually doing? How are they actually feeling? You know, where is success coming from? And when we do this assessment plan, and we do this here on a regular basis, you're going to start to know the player and go, well, that's not like them to miss those putts, you know, that something else must be up, where it's just obvious. A lot of players look at the putt and go, nah, they missed the putt. So I was at an event one time and I was following a player on the last 9 holes, and they came to me. So they missed like probably three fairly easy putts on the last 9 holes. And I said, okay, let's go to the putting green and do a bit of work afterwards. And they said, no, I don't need to. I'm like, oh, well, why not? And they're like, no, my putting is really good. I was like, okay. I was watching the last 9 holes. Looked like, you know, you might have struggled a little bit there on those couple of ones. No, I didn't really want to tell them that, hey, didn't look good at all. So they said, no, my putting is good. And I'm like, okay, you got to explain it a little bit more. And they go, my mind is just, it's a little bit, I'm just not concentrating well today. I'm finding it I'm very distracted over the ball. I think I'm extremely tired, you know, and I need to go home and get some rest. I'm like, so you're putting? No, my putting's great. I feel great about my putting, you know. And I thought, what great insight, you know, that player knows themselves so well that they recognize that they feel more distracted and more uncomfortable in that situation, and that's probably the reason that they're not putting well, as opposed to, I think 99.9% of the other players would be dragging me to the putting green. Okay, fix it, there's something broken. What's broken? And that comes back to us during this assessment plan and during our training, that we need to help the players recognize how they're feeling in that moment, because we have to try to get them to get into that same kind of rhythm more often. And also, if they're feeling uncomfortable, we also want to make sure that they know that that's okay. You know, in the training that we've done, you've seen that even being uncomfortable, we still performed well. So when they feel uncomfortable on the golf course, they're much more likely to go, no, I felt this before, but I've still putted well. I don't need to put it up to that. So as coaches, we're just looking at some different ways to think of it. The other thing is that I often like to see if I can take someone who's doing something well and make it worse. And that sounds really counterintuitive, because what I want to do is, if a player is at this level, what inputs in behavior or thinking could I put in there that would make them sink down? Because if I can train this here in practice and they now go, okay, I really struggled with that, then they know to recognize that in the future, and then they can take that there and make it better. So what one did I do here? Yeah, so we did this here. This is one of the ones that we do. It's like a 5 foot and an 8 foot drill. You know, we do same location, so straight up the hill, very easy putt, and then we randomize it so it gets worse, and then we make it harder, like around the hole, and then we make it very difficult putts. And what we're going to see is a decline in performance. So we're literally trying to make the player worse. So if you've got a very good player, you might want to start them out at 8 feet instead of 5 feet, because at 5 feet, they still might make too many. At 8 feet, if they make too many, move them up to 10 or 11 feet. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to make them worse. And we're trying to actually stress them out and see how they behave. And what we would often do is I would go through the 4 exercises, and then I would bring them after they're very frustrated, angry, mad, and then I would even say, yeah, it looks like you're doing something. What are you doing with your hands there? Like, I would try and almost input negative thoughts into their head, and then I would go and actually get them to do the same location, the first one. And what often we would see is if they were 7 out of 10 the first time, you know, with clear thoughts, now they're 4 out of 10. So we've done something to make this player worse. And then we have to explain to the player what we've done. We've basically input the wrong thoughts and changed their routine, changed their habits, changed their outlook. And that's obviously changed the performance. And then we would do the same exercise again, but we would be focusing more on trying to keep them at the same level, you know, comfortable, relaxed, whatever it is. You know, if you need a little bit of stress, we want to keep it a little bit of stress, but keep them at that same level and take them through that same exercise and get them to understand that they will have ups and downs, and how they manage themselves is probably more important than their stroke or their mechanics. So this is why we often do this assessment, so that we can learn from these things here. This is another one that I like to do. It's called the failure drill. So I set up a 2 foot square, kind of in the middle of the green or in a little bit of a slope, and we do north, east, south, and west. And we start off usually around 5 feet, and then so you have to hit into the square from each side. And if you get it, then you move to 6 feet and get it to move to 7 feet and get it to move to 8 feet. And you tell the player, okay, you've got 10 minutes to do this exercise. Shouldn't be any problem. You should blow through it. Now, depending on your skill level with the player, you know, you might start them out at 3 feet, go 4, 5, 6, or whatever, up to 7 or whatever your number is. For the better players, what I do is I do this here. And what we generally see is that they'll do the 5 footer, they'll do the 6 footer, they might even do the 7 footer. And then they'll make a mistake, and then they'll be frustrated because they got to go back to 5 feet. And I'll be going, okay, come on, we only got like another 4 minutes. Let's hammer through this and get it done. And then they'll do it. But all of a sudden they'll start missing putts in the 5 foot section and have to start again. And then they'll start missing. And now all of a sudden they can't get out of the 5 footer range. They can't get the 6 foot, because obviously we've created that failure pattern. So then they're starting to think that this is very difficult and they won't be able to achieve it. So again, this is looking at how the mindset, as the mindset changes, how the performance actually changes. Because, you know, in 10 minutes, did the player actually change? No, they were exactly the same player as they were before, but something changed inside them and how they were thinking about it that ended up making them struggle. So this is what we have as our failure drill. So when we're thinking about these assessment plans, what we're really trying to think about is that we're coaching people, not just the golfer, you know? So as a person, what are they going through? What are they thinking? Are they thinking the right things? And if they're not thinking the right things, we obviously have to help them with that and show them what they need to be thinking. And often what we'll do with players is we'll write out the full routine, exactly how the routine goes, exactly how all the thoughts, the only thoughts that you're allowing yourself to think about, and then we'll coach that there over and over and over and over and over again. And when you see these players holding putts on the last holes and making these big putts to win, and you're thinking, God, how do they do that there? It's been trained into them, you know? It's so well ingrained into them that by getting into their routine, they actually get into a level of comfort because they've done it so much over and over and over again. Where I think we often, certainly in my early careers, I would have done a little bit with them and then I would have jumped onto something else and then I would have jumped onto something else and something else. But now I'm much more on task with what we want to do with the players. So the training obviously has a lot to do with this here. So let's take a couple of questions here. If anybody has anything about any of the stuff around sort of developing an assessment and a measurement tool at the beginning of a lesson.
Any questions? Just open the microphone and
anything from your perspective there that you're thinking?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe with kind of assessing the emotional side, like when you put like if they're frustrated, happy, sad, how do you do it? Or is it that you have to get to know the players first? So
you really have to get to know the player a little bit more at the beginning. They're going to fake it, you know, they're going to say, oh, I'm fine, you know, yeah, no, I'm not, you know, they're not going to show their true colors until you kind of spend a bit of time with them. And it was interesting. I had a player come to me recently and they said, hey, I'm looking for a new coach. And I was like, oh, okay, what's the story? And he goes, well, I'm just not getting any better anymore. And I want to get a new coach. I'm like, okay. Tell me about the relationship with your coach. And they're like, oh, what a great guy, fantastic guy. Like, and I've done really well with him and I've improved a ton. I'm like, okay, so this player obviously knows you very well. And they're like, yeah, they come over to the house and all, that we're good friends. You know, he knows me very, very well. And I was like, well, that's a very important component of getting a player better, is that this player actually knows you, knows how you like information. Maybe it's an information thing at this stage. I'm like, why don't you bring your coach with you to see me? Don't fire your coach. Just bring him with to see me. I'll tell you what I think. If you guys agree on it, he would probably be the best coach to coach you moving forward, because I'm going to take a number of weeks and months to figure you out, to figure out how you like things, where your coach already knows you how to do that there. And it's been funny. I've done it a few times with a number of players now, and it's actually worked out really well. So the player stayed with the coach, but used some of the ideas that I had come up with, and the player improved quite quickly after that point. Where if they had have come to me, it doesn't mean I couldn't improve them, but it's more likely it would have taken me longer to understand them, that I might not have improved them as quickly as that original coach did. So just an interesting fact about kind of, you talk about that emotional side.
Yeah. And do you think that kind of like with young players, when they come on tour as rookies, they too often kind of change coaches because they get kind of into the idea that they have to start doing something different now that they're on tour, and they have to go with a kind of like a well-known tour coach, and then they kind of leave their coach that they have worked with for maybe the whole career behind, and then they kind of start struggling because they're working with a coach that doesn't know them. So,
well, you look at Rory McIlroy at the minute with Pete Cowan. Like, Pete Cowan is a fantastic golf coach, like fantastic, but Pete doesn't know Rory the way Michael Bannon, who is his childhood coach, knows Rory. You know, it just, things just sometimes get a little stale. Now, Rory is going to be obviously back working with Michael full time, because he thinks that's the best thing for him. So I think it's an interesting thing to share with some of your juniors, because you need to, I think you need to prime this information early, because as soon as they get good enough, they start looking around, and then they look for these coaches, and then they're running off to these coaches, and then all of a sudden, they're not on tour anymore. They're off the tour. They're not getting better anymore. They're getting way worse. Because as a coach, obviously the player shows up and we see all the things that are wrong with them. We don't see all the 7 years before that the other coach has turned into this player that actually looks pretty good, So it's an interesting one. And I think when we do the assessment, not only are we trying to look at the skills, but we're trying to look at the emotional standpoint, which is a good point.
There's a couple of questions in the chat, but one question before that. How often do you do the assessments? Does it vary from player to player, or do you have kind of a...
Yeah, so when I'm on tour, I do it every week. So every week they have an assessment, but the player doesn't know what the assessment is. They don't know if I'm trying to do failure, or they don't know. You can only do the failure stuff a few times before they start to know that that's what you're doing, but sometimes we'll just do the assessment and they'll run through it, and I'll just try to get a rough understanding of what's going on, and I'll be asking them questions. If it's a recreational golfer, probably once a month, they would come. If you think that there's enough value in them doing it to see that they've got better, I think they're going to feel amazing about what they've done in that month, because you're going to be able to say, well, here's where you were, you got 4 out of 10 here. Now we've done it. You're 7 out of 10. You're clearly doing something that's making you better. That player then has a totally different mindset about the work that you guys are doing, and they will buy in so much further into what you want to tell them to do. So you'll be able to make bigger strides because they've got more buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see the questions. There's one, any examples for speed drills? Yeah,
we've got, so one of the things that I like to do with speed is I take a 20-foot putt and I just get the player to go back and forth. So I put 2 tees at 20 feet on a fairly flat slope, and I just go back and forth until they actually get the speed down, because there's no point giving them too much randomized stuff if they don't really have the speed control down. If they're not controlling their speed at that 20-foot period, we have to figure out why. Are they accelerating too much? Are they striking the putt in the wrong place? Is there something technical there? Is there vision? Because sometimes when you look at a target and you're hitting at it, what you actually see is not quite there. So we're going to talk a little bit about the glasses that I use. Often what we'll see is a player's eyes will look a couple of feet short or a couple of feet long, and they don't realize that they're doing this, and then they just don't control the speed as well. So I think that 20-foot assessment is my first step for the player, and then we can work in some of the other things after. But yeah, good question.
Then the question from Jussi. Hi, Gareth, thanks for sharing your thoughts. How do you manage the assessments and teaching failure in a squad or group environment?
I haven't done it enough through a group environment, because everybody's emotions at that stage is going to be quite different and quite hard to manage. But it's an interesting one. I'd have to do it. I think you would have to do it in like pods, 2 or 3s. Because if you have a group of 10 or 15 players or more, like probably not more than that there, but I think it'd be hard to pinpoint their reactions, because really what we're trying to do is we're trying to see how they're behaving when they're feeling. So if we know how they're behaving, then we're going to notice that pattern, and if we watch them for long enough and we see that pattern on the golf course, we're going to be able to tie that to an emotion. But the group stuff has a positive, but also got a kind of a negative, because players will feel very embarrassed because they can't do it, and you'll get a couple of players doing it well, and then you'll get a couple of players going, oh, this is a stupid drill, why are we doing this here? So they're going to destroy kind of the environment that you're trying to create.
Yeah.
So I think the failure one maybe in a group can be tricky. I've only ever done it with 2 people max.
One more. What putting tools do you find the most efficient in practice, either for technique or random practice?
So for me, I like a ruler, like a putting ruler, something that you can put the ball down on the ruler. So that's kind of a bit more, it's not random, obviously, we're just sitting in the same place. And then I like to work, so I kind of work, I'm going to talk about this in a minute. I like to work on the skills first, and then what I like to work is performing, how a player can perform. So I use Capto, I use Sandpot Lab, I use a lot of technology, but that's more at the beginning to get an idea of what the player is doing. After I've got an idea what the player is doing, and I've got a good picture of them uphill, downhill, side hill, then I will use something simple like Jin Young Ko, for example. She wasn't starting the ball well online. She kind of hooded the putter on the way back and then like reopened it on the way through. And what I did is I went to Home Depot and I bought her a ruler, and she practiced for 30 minutes every day on this ruler. And all of a sudden, she didn't hood it as much. She kept it a little bit straighter, still a little bit of hooding in there, but the ruler helped improve that part of her. Instead of me trying to tell her she was doing all this stuff wrong, I just said, here's a ruler, put 30 minutes every day, and that worked on our start line. We have some aiming drills that we do as well, some speed drills, and then some green reading drills. So we kind of add them, and we're going to talk about that there a little more detail down as we go. But I think if the skills are not strong, there's no point randomizing it. I think you're really setting the player, like if you're stuck on time, then that's tough. But if the skills are not strong, then the player is probably going to not perform well. So you've got to train the skills like you were training soccer practice every day. You do your drills every day. It's the same thing. It's extremely boring and repetitive. But then, after they're bored with their drills for 3 weeks, then you change the drills, but the drills are still trying to do the same things. So I would say that repetition is probably one of the biggest things. And I know there's a couple of hockey coaches here in Canada, and there's one hockey coach in particular, he's passed away now, but he always got bashed. Like all the players and all the coaches, especially all the younger coaches, would all go, oh, he's crap, he's no good. He just makes the players do like the 6 same drills over and over and over again. And like that's not how to coach players anymore. But the interesting thing is that he turned numerous players into NHL players, and his teams were pretty much in the finals almost every single year. So the new coaches were bashing him because he wasn't giving enough variety, but his teams always performed well. Now, I think there's somewhere in between there. I think there's that repetition that creates the players to perform well, but there's also, you've got to make them better thinkers as well, and better imagination, and do some things that are going to engage them a little bit more than just sort of going over and over again. So, but yeah, interesting.
How do you yourself, do you build a really kind of a strict practice plans for your players? Like, okay, if you practice 1 hour, this is that you do 10 minutes of this, or is it like do the players do it themselves, or does it depend or vary?
Yeah, so it's broken into 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour, and 30 minutes. So if the player has 3 hours to practice their putting, they have a full plan. And there's a couple of the 3-hour plans. There's a couple of 2-hour plans, and there's a couple of 1 hours, and there's like 5 or 6 of the 30-minute ones. And they're just a series of drills and exercises that the player goes through. And depending on their time, they just pre-select the training, and then they put it in their diary or their journal. And then I can see, you know, and they're all labeled day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, like they all have numbers for them. And then I can see what type of work that they're doing when they're away from me. And it keeps them accountable. So they also will have scores involved in that. So they'll write down, okay, I did exercise 4 and I scored 7 out of 10, you know, but based loosely on time. And it was the PGA Tour pros that were asking me for that. They were like, I want to have something simple where I have a set amount of time and I can go and work on my stuff. But I don't want to go and have any planning. The player said, I don't want to think even a second about anything. I just want to do my drills and leave. I'm like, okay. I like that.
Okay, good. So I think that's all the questions so far, and we're ready for the second part.
All right. Okay. So, you know, I think as coaches, we have defaults. You know, we have things that we are biased towards when we're looking to get players better. So these are the things that I kind of think about, and I break it up into 3 different categories. So technical, skills, or performance. So what we're trying to do is, can we get the player to perform well? Like that's where I start. You know, I think when I started on tour, I definitely didn't do this. I was 100% technical started, and then we would build some drills and skills in, and then we would figure out how to make them perform well on the golf course. Now we do it the completely opposite way. And I've had a lot of success with this. So what we try to do is that, what could we do if you've got a player who shoots 85, what could we do to get that player to shoot 79 without doing too much with their technique? Because obviously if we improve their technique after they know how to perform, they're going to be, you know, shooting below 80, and then we improve them technically, then they're going to really accelerate and they're going to get better very quickly at that stage. But if they don't know how to perform, they don't know how to score better, you know, they don't know how to make better decisions, the likelihood of them actually improving after you've made the technical changes, it doesn't mean it won't happen, but it's kind of a slow process. So this is how I break everything down, and this is how I think of everything. So I'm either, and I drew them as different sizes of circles or shapes here, because they're not the same. They're all different. And when they're training, the player needs to know if they're training technically today, if they're doing skill-based training, or if they're doing performance-based training. And if they know which type of training that they're doing, they're more likely going to accept that in a technical environment, our goal is to understand the movement patterns that we're trying to do, but not necessarily be too concerned with the outcome. As we go into like skills, obviously it's a bit more, there's some randomization, but you know, you're still kind of in this, you could be still in the same spot hitting 10 putts from the same position. Now, when we're in performance, very different. Performance is all about getting the ball in the hole. And I'll often have players going, hey, is my arm coming up? And I'm like, I don't care. I don't care what your arm's doing. You're in the performance mindset. I don't care what's happening. Figure it out. You know, you've got to get the ball in the hole. And it's a flip, it's a switch that we have to do, and not go straight back to technique, you know, or we'll go back to skills and go, hey, I was doing it really well yesterday, but I don't know what the story is now. So I think that's an important thing. So when we look at performance, you know, we're way more interested in play and competition, and seeing if there's a bit of a divide. So if your player shoots, you know, 85 in normal play, expect him to shoot 95 in competition. You know, like there will be a massive change there, you know, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to narrow that gap. So if a player usually shoots 75 in their normal play, we would expect them hopefully to shoot around the same in their competition. If we can do that there, then we've actually got their performance mapped out pretty well. But if we see a huge divide in their normal play with their friends and their competition play, then we have a performance issue that we need to address, not a technical issue, because they've got enough technical skills to shoot whatever score they were shooting to make us happy with that outcome, but they're not doing it in play. So there's much more stuff going on behind the scenes there. So another way we could measure this is simply like strokes gained. So strokes gained in putting is a really good tool. There's lots of sites. If you just type in stroke gained putting, they have calculators that will tell you if you have a putt from 5 foot versus 10 foot versus 20 foot, what is the percentage? And you could set up 10 different putts, strokes gained versus, me. Where are you? Are you above it or below it? So really easy thing. In performance, it's all about testing and retesting, testing, retesting. I heard an interesting one. It was the guy who won the FedEx Cup. My mind's going blank at the minute. Anyway, he when he was going to high school, they had a competition every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and it was a 9-hole competition. So as he was going through all his high school years, he was figuring out how to play the game, and he was getting what I call testing and retesting on a regular basis. Where if you think about I don't know how many tournaments that you've got players there, or they do club tournaments or regional tournaments, but we often have players that they'll go to these bigger tournaments and just blow their brains out. They just don't know how to perform in that environment because we haven't created enough testing for the player to actually overcome some of those performance anxieties that they do have, or they just don't know how to manage themselves in that situation. So that comes back to sort of strategy and education. So we've got to go out on the golf course with the players and teach them how to play the game a little bit better. And that kind of ties back into what our own philosophy is and how we think the game should be played and how we think it should be played the best possible way. Obviously, performance can be measured by physical as well. If your player is not healthy or is not managed to sustain his energy for the 18 holes, then obviously we'll see a dip in performance. So physically, the player needs to be working out and doing a number of different exercises, because from a brain standpoint, that's going to make them much sharper. So the level of training, like we talked about before, is really important. So the performance will basically upgrade the skill. So if we're skilling and we're doing the stuff before, when we turn it into performance-based, that skill then becomes a little bit of ownership, and we have a higher level of execution. That's what we're trying to do. We can look at obviously technical stuff, which is a key component for a player to play well, but it's not the first thing. Equipment is a very easy change that we can do that would change the performance. And then routines and habits. So what are your routines and habits? Like we talked about, my pros on the PGA Tour, they just look at their schedule. I have an hour today. Okay, here's my drills. I have 2 hours today. Here's my drills. The routines and the habits are all the same. They're not going to the golf course going, hey, I wonder what I should work on today. I wonder, should I do this or do that? So it gets a little bit wasted. So in the skills department, we've got kind of these 4 real ones, but routine at the end and skill matching is probably something that I see players struggling with the most. So they'll do a lot of skill drilling, and they'll find a lot of success, but they haven't built in the routine and they haven't matched up the skills well enough at the end. So these are our 4. So I'm going to go through these real quick because I want to make sure I get enough time to cover all our stuff here. So our 4 skills, and when we rank them from sort of difficulty or error, we usually see about a 40% error in speed. So speed would be the hardest skill for us to improve. Then it would be green reading. Then obviously aim. This is the amount of error that we would have, and then start line. And I think when I see players, they will spend more time working on their start line, getting the ball to start on line, their stroke, the difference between a good stroke and a bad stroke is marginal. Could be half a degree, could be 1 degree. So it's very, very small. I'd rather spend the time working on the other things because I think there's a better impact on the performance, where if you don't really know how to go about working on these skills, you tend to work on, you know, a lot of stuff that's stroke based, which will improve the stroke, but probably won't change the performance that much. So this is a skill matching here. This is Jin Young Ko, and we've set out, you know, a number of different targets. The one on the left there, at the same distance, just going around the hole, seeing if she can get the ball to go into the hole at the right speed. The other one here, the third one over, we have her predetermined line set out. We have a target out in the background. That's where she knows that she's aiming, and she's trying to get that ball to roll on that target, unlike putt view there. We also have the one on the very right there where we put some discs down. And what we do is we actually get the player to put the discs down so they can start to visualize the way the ball would roll. And then we set the ball up there and we test it to see if they're able to match it. And again, once we know that we're skill matching well, you know, that the ball's starting on line with good speed, they're aiming it well, and they're reading it well, then we know that the likelihood of them performing well is probably quite high. And again, you can use, like we said, you can use these here type of an assessment plan to figure out, you know, when they're doing these things, are they doing them better or worse now? So when we go into skill matching, we might do the same exercise. So instead of seeing, let's just say the third one over had, you know, aim off and the read off, it only has speed now. So not only are you improving the skill, you're improving, you know, aim might be taken care of and line might be taken care of, where you might have had 2 or 3 in those categories before. Hope that makes sense. So we're still seeing error, which we should see, but we're not seeing it through all of the 4 different skills. So technical stuff is basically fairly simple, you know, our setup and our posture, alignment, eye line, head position, club face. I'm going to talk a bit about that in a minute. I'm just going to keep moving through here. So again, when a player comes to me, this is how I'm thinking about it. You know, can I improve their performance, and how would I improve their performance first? Okay, can I get them to train better, or can we do some really good skill stuff that would improve them? And if that's not really going to do the trick, then okay, all right, let's make some technical changes and get them doing that. But if we were building this out into like an hour practice here, we may have 15 minutes technical, maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes of skill, and then the remaining would be on the performance, you know, so we'd be dividing them out. As we get closer to tournament time, what we would have is 5 minutes of technical, let's say, maybe 20 minutes or 25 minutes of skill. So that's half of the time gone. And about the last 30 minutes would be all performance stuff. So those 3 skills, those 3 areas would be kind of taken over. So basically, whatever you want, if you want to perform well, you've got to create the environment that you want to be in most of the time. So if we want to perform well, we have to be in a performance environment. If I want to make a change to my golf swing or to my putting, I'm going to be in a very much more of a technical standpoint. But in that technical side, I'm not really going to make that many changes. Like, I'm not really going to be able to perform that well because I'm still quite technically minded. So I have to be able to switch that over into the performance side. So we're going to run through kind of Jin Young Ko and some of the things that I did with her. And this was her setup before I did anything with her. And obviously she's a pretty good player at that stage. She'd won a number of times in Korea, had never won on the LPGA tour. But maybe if you guys want to have a look at that there, and is there anything in this setup here that you think that you would change? Maybe it looks pretty good. So hopefully this will give you an idea what we're trying to look at. So here's a couple of things. couple of things that I look at. Does the setup allow you to swing freely? Practice for long periods, pain-free. That's often what I hear. I get a lot of back pain, a lot of issues, so is your athlete set up to actually put in the work? Because it's great that we want them to work, 4 hours a day on their putting, or 2 hours a day, or 1 hour a day in the putting. But if they're not in a position that would allow them to do that they're going to have pain, and then they're going to just stop doing it, and their ability to perform well and continue to practice long hours is not going to be there. So that was the first thing I noticed with her. I noticed that her body lines, feet were one way, putter face was another, forearms, shoulder, and obviously from the first one that she's bent over quite a bit there. Eye line outside the target line, shoulders and hand relationship. So I like that red line. If you draw the red line from the shoulders straight down, you kind of want it to intersect the hands. So I'll show you. So if I have from my shoulders straight down here, I want it to sort of be right in the center of my hands. If I have it too far out here, what's going to happen, I'll produce sort of too much of an arc. And if it's in too, like if my shoulder line is out here, I'm actually going to create a reverse arc. So it causes a number of things. So I really want that shoulder position, because now it's strong and stable. I'll be able to swing. If I have it out here, there's too much force. I can feel it here, that I'm not going to be able to control it the same way in here. It's not supported by the shoulders there. So that's an important one there. So, one of the players, I always laugh, a player on the tour, PGA Tour, asked one of my players, hey, I want to take a lesson with Gareth. Like, what does he teach? What does he do? Blah, blah, blah. He was trying to figure out, my philosophy, I suppose. And the player's like, I don't really know. I don't know what he teaches, like we work a lot on setup. I do a lot of drills and exercises, and then I do a lot of just playing, and they're like, it was almost the greatest compliment, but the worst compliment when he's trying to actually tell another pro that there's such good stuff here. But what I like about it is that he doesn't know anything about his stroke. It's just, here's the work that he needs to do, and then he does it and it improves him. So for me, it's about creating a setup that's free. You've got to have freedom that you can just swing it. You get a lot of people, like Dave Stockton was one guy. He was good. He always held the putter and forced it, I just don't believe in that. I don't believe it holds up under pressure. Like if you go back to my players, they always play well down the stretch. They always, if they have to hold the putt, they hold it, or they'll be close to holding it, so there's a reason that they do that. There is that we're meticulous with the setup so that the putter can move freely. And the players don't even think about how the putter moves. They just swing it. Like it's like a golf swing, they're just swinging the club. They're not actually trying to control the club, which is very different. So what we did is we corrected the posture. So it was much lower before there. So we got her a little bit taller, rounded obviously the upper thoracic spine. And that puts the head down. So what we want here is the hips. So instead of tilted out, the hips kind of go under. So hips go under. That takes the stress off on the lower back. And then what we do is we round the upper part so that our head faces straight down. And that gets us into a pretty good posture. This is something I pretty much recommend for most players. Again, just so that they can do it. Now, what this does is it obviously creates a balance point. So they're very balanced. If I'm trying to create a stroke that's free, that moves freely, I need to be balanced. What you'll notice, if you see the putter kind of going out like this, or going to the left, what we'll often see is that we're not actually balanced. Our center of gravity here is either too far forward or too far back. And that's why we see the putter moving to kind of compensate for some of those things. So creating that center of gravity there, that the player is nice and stable, is really, really super important. Cleaned up the body lines. So got everything nice and straight and in a nice direction. I always like the forearm shaft, so it's like a plane line thing. So I put my club up here, it runs straight down my forearm, elbows go in, and then I bend over. And that gets it going. And it runs right up the palm of my hand instead of in my fingers. Because in my fingers creates way too much rotation, too much movement. The palm of my hand creates much more stability. And then I can do, and that's often the hardest part for the players, is getting it into their hands, into their forms. And now we really only have to kind of watch for a little bit of the elbows kind of moving away. That's why you'll see the towel under the arms there. So we've got that connection point. So we can do this here. So again, this is all, kind of more in that technical, head being very important here. We want that head to be down so that we can rotate the head in the right direction. We'll talk a little bit about that there with our eye stuff in a minute. And the shoulders and the hands kind of matching up there, kind of nice. And then the towel under the arms just to create that connection. No different than our golf swing, no different than having our full swing. We don't want to have the arms separated too much from the body. We want to have them in the same spot. So you can see here the center. Oh, did I have this in video or not? Oops. I don't think I did. Center of gravity with these players, the young girl, the hands getting sort of too far out this way, then you see very unstable putter on the way through, Same with the other guy. Everything's back here on the heels. And then what you'll see is the putter moving kind of far out this way. So pay attention to the release of the putter, because it'll also tell you where their center of gravity is. And then obviously you can just move people into the right position. Obviously taking away a lot of this bend if you can, we don't really want to have that happening too much. All right, so here's a little scenario here with Jin Young. So what would you change here? This is a position that I really like with a lot of players, is if I can get a video from behind, it will tell me a lot about their positioning and their head position. So the back view is an important spot to have, because we can kind of see what's good. So there's the change that we made. So putter face was kind of wide open to her body line, and then we squared it up and put it right here in the center of her body. That's kind of the middle of your body. If you think about a door opening and closing, this is our midpoint. So it closes there. This allows, again, like we talked about, this allows the putter to be free. So I can just swing it, ball gets in the way, piece of cake. You can see there, the club face kind of wide open, and then we squared it right up there. You see there a little bit too, the reason that it was open was to do with the body tilt. So the back is tilted kind of this way a little bit. And then because it's tilted that way, the head is tilted that way. And then the face basically just matches, the face just matches that. So you can see everything kind of matches up, but it's off. So then what we're going to do is we're going to create strikes that are often off center. We're going to struggle with distance control. You're going to produce some spin on the ball, and it's just going to be inconsistent.
Hey, Gareth, can you hear me? It kind of froze up. Katsotaan, eli nyt tuolla ilmeisesti katos linjoilta, odottaa hetki, niin eikä me saada kohta takaisin. Tosiaan, jos haluaa, niin tuolla oli yksi kysymys Ertsiltä tullut, kysytään kohta, mutta jos tulee jotain kysymyksiä tässä aina matkaan, niin tuonne chattiin voi kirjoittaa myös suomeksi tai englanniksi, niin sitten pysähdytään, mutta katsotaan, saadaan Gareth takaisin linjoille.
All right, bear with me. All right, we're back. We're back in business almost.
Yep.
Not sure why it keeps kicking me out here, but we could save it. All right. Okay, that good?
Yeah, it's now, yeah, we can see that, so.
All right, perfect. All right, so just go up to, oh, okay. So we're just seeing kind of that, if we're looking from that back view, we're seeing that elbow, you know, we want to see if we've got elbows protruding, because if I tilt my body, you know, if you're doing a lot of stuff online now too, you know, ask them for the back view, because if you're tilting your body, what you're going to see is you'll probably see one elbow more than the other. And then you'll see, as people are swinging, you can see that kind of separating. So we want to try and get that connected there, because that has a relationship with the face as well. You know, so getting those elbows connected so that everything just swings kind of freely, but also getting that ball position and everything set up correctly. Again, measuring from behind is kind of the ultimate one. And then paying attention that the head is in the right spot. I always joke, you have your head on straight with players. You know, these are sort of common problems that we often see here. You can see if I draw my line up her back from her tailbone to her neckline there, and you can see that the head is already off tilted, and we draw the yellow line straight down, that becomes kind of the middle of her stroke. So if you were swinging freely, that's where the putter would be squarest, but because the ball is too far forward, you'll see that player kind of like drift just to make contact. They'll often leave the face wide open. Gets very inconsistent there for that player as well. And I do like a certain setup here. Young guy on the left is a young Irish guy, Tom McKibben. He's on the Challenge Tour now. Niall Kearney, a European Tour player. Morey Jutanagar, Thai player, and then another little junior I just thought I'd throw up there just to show you the difference when they get into the right position versus the wrong position. So the setup, you know, you can kind of see there's definite similarities to it that I like to see for players. When they're in a right position, then I think, like I said before, I think the putter swings freely, and it's easier sort of happen. Here you can see a girl here with her head sort of tilted off to the side. So that's really going to throw off her aim. So this player actually had a pretty good stroke, but because the head tilt was so severe, they just had no clue where they were aiming the putter. So they're missing so many short putts just from this one little thing. So we fixed that. All of a sudden, it's a lot better. And then again, this is just some tour pros from behind as well. This is an important position that we look at, throwing an alignment club down just so we can kind of see what direction that we're in. So an important part to look at, and if you start looking at it from this angle, it'll start to really help you understand their body alignment and if they could actually swing the putter freely or not. If their body looked like it was contorted or moved, not very likely that they're going to be able to swing freely. So this is an exercise that I do with the player to help them train their eyes. So we put these dots in a row, and you can see it here. I have it on my putting mat. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a row of dots that I have here. And what I'll do is I'll set up and I'll just go from one dot to the next dot to the next to the next, and then train my eyes back. So often what we see with players is that when they're moving their head, they'll move their head up on a different axis, and that'll throw off the perception of where they think that they're aiming. So getting your head to rotate on one axis is very important, because that's the perception. I'm sure you've had it yourself. You've stood up over a putt and you've looked up and you're like, oh, it doesn't feel right. Something doesn't feel off. Often that there is just the setup. Our head is not quite in the right position, so we're not really seeing kind of what we want to see, right? We'll just skip that one there. So this is something that we do for aiming as well. So we'll set up, I'll put a ruler down and I'll set up the player, and I'll put a T at the end, and we'll just ask the player to look up towards the T. So look up, do you feel like you're aiming towards the T or not? And then from there we can make some adjustments. Now often we can change equipment. You know, the neck of the putter is probably one of the simplest things that we can do, or the lines that you see on the putter, you know, whether it's a line or a dot or a marking. Those are all things that can really contribute and help the player aim a little bit better. Generally, if we see an aimer, a bad aimer can be anywhere about 8 degrees off. A bad stroke is generally only about 2 degrees off. So it's way more important to have your aim somewhat tidy than to have your stroke. So you're better to have a bad stroke and be a good aimer than the vice versa. So a couple of things to think about. And then like we had talked about there, if the head or the neck tilt, either up or down or left or right here, is a little bit off, it'll throw off the perception of where the player thinks. And all of a sudden, you know, you get these players missing all these short putts, and you're like, you know, they're clearly good players, so they're just not perceiving things right. So we always go back to this drill here where we have this straight line set up, and we get the player to train on that. And we do that there quite a bit because it helps to, we call it calibrate the eyes. So first thing that we do, if we look up and the line doesn't look straight, we move distance from the ball. So we'll either move closer and look at it, or further away and look at it, and that'll tell us if we're a little bit off there. Next one is our head tilt. So we're going to make sure, if we look from behind again, that our head is on straight, it's not tilted off in different directions. And it seems funny to say that there, but when you look at players, you're going to notice this here all the time now. You're going to see that their head is tilted, and then all of a sudden they don't perform as well. They tend to miss a lot of short putts, and they may have a perfect stroke, like perfect. And then pitch. So pitch is up and down. So if the head is facing straight down or up, because when it's up too much, it rotates on a different angle. Where it's down, it'll rotate like this. So, oh, this is the putting mat that I designed. And you can see the dots down the left-hand side. So I have a couple of tour pros that all use this here. And I have a couple that actually travel with it because they want to do the dot stuff at home in the hotel room. So they have the mat that they travel with, believe it or not. And then we've got obviously the straight line, the orange one there. So training the eyes is a very important part if you want to perform consistent more often, because if you're standing over a ball and you feel uncomfortable, the chances of you hitting a good putt is probably slim. So the reason, there's a couple of reasons. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but the head and the eyes are very important, because if the eyes are not looking straight in this direction, as I'm looking at you guys right now, we can't create what's called a fixation. So where I would actually have a focus point. If my head is pitched up or down or sideways, what we're going to do is we're going to create sort of a change in the perception. So the big circle in the middle is basically my head straight. The first one on the left there, you can see the circle has come down. That's when my head rises up. So in the middle of my eye socket, if my head rises up, my eye comes down, and it changes my perception as I tilt my head. I'm not going to be able to see as far, or I will often see off to the left. Same thing as if my head was down and my eyes rise up, I'm going to often see out to the right a little bit more. So, all that being said, I don't try and go around this. I just try to make sure that the player's face and head is straight on. And if you're looking from this angle, that it's straight down. Because when it's straight down like this, I can rotate my head well, and I can see down the target line. And my perception, when I'm standing here, I can see the computer. So I can see 20, 30 feet out, even though I'm looking here, because in my perception here, I can see so much more. If I were to pitch my head up here, I no longer can see the computer, which is only, 8 feet away. My perception has totally changed, and I'm seeing much more over here. The same thing, if my head was pitched down here, I can't see much, but I'm also seeing way more off to the left. So that pitch has a lot to do with our perception and where we can see, and our field of vision. I want to have the most amount of field of vision. So if I have a long putt, a 30-footer, I want to have my head down, but almost still have a vision of it. If I have no vision of it and I'm blocked here, it's very hard to judge the distance there. The same thing is if my head's on a tilt, or a tilt up or tilt down, then we've got some real issues with our perception and where we're actually looking. So simple terms, we just want the face straight on so that the eyes can look straight out, so we can create what's called a fixation. This is, I have a pair of glasses that when you put them on, you can actually, this is what the computer is seeing. So these glasses recognize your eyes. And what we're looking for here is that in the testing that we did, when I look down, see the way the circle gets bigger? That's me fixating on the target. So as that circle gets bigger, that's a fixation. What we'll notice with players who struggle is that circle will move around quite a bit. And one of the biggest reasons it moves around is because the setup is not quite correct. So we've got to make sure that that setup and the head is in that position. Now, if the eyes are moving around, think about what that is telling your brain, because your eyes are actually part of your brain, and that's taking in information in. So if your eyes are moving all over the screen and around, it's basically indecision. Your body doesn't know what you're trying to do. It doesn't know where the target is. And that movement pattern will often look in different areas here. It won't actually follow straight up the line. And that's why the little dot line that we had that I showed you earlier there, that's why we train players to do this, so that they get used to seeing that their eye line And if you notice there, I'll run it one more time. You'll notice that my eyes are running straight up there. Oops. Not a very good video here. Doesn't like me at the minute. You see that line drawing straight up there, or just to the right edge of it. And then my body is able to produce that because that's what my eyes are seeing. We often see players, when we do this testing, their eyes will be looking a little bit right of the hole, and they can swear, I'm aiming at the hole, but they're, even though they might be aiming at the hole, because their eyes are actually over off in a different direction, their putter will move in that direction. So the putter will move in the direction that your eyes are perceiving, even if you don't really know where your eyes are looking. So that's why, back to the setup being so crucial. Again, you know, when we think about like fixation, measures the amount of time. So if I'm fixated on a point, there's a good chance that my body knows what it's trying to do. If it's gazing and it's moving around all the time, there's a good chance that it doesn't know what it's doing. It's kind of like I've got the Top Gun there. It's kind of when you lock on to the target, you know, and that focusing is so important because it then sends the message to the brain that this is what I want to happen. If it's moving around too much, the message to the brain kind of gets lost. Now, like we talked about before, if we're not training this here on a regular basis, it doesn't matter how much we try to implement it once or twice, it really won't happen. So if you go to any of the players, what you'll notice that I have, they'll look up, they'll take in the information for at least a second and a half, 2 seconds. Draw your eyes back, go. They have this pattern that they do over and over and over again. And when they do that there, the brain also recognizes that, and it will help them to produce the stroke that they're looking for every time. But if their eyes are wandering all over the place or getting distracted, then we often see the performance changing there. So we'll often come back to training with the line, with the dots, and getting that there into the right spot. So just something interesting about the eyes. So again, it's affected by, you know, right and left, pitch up and down. And if your eyes are, you know, too far inside the ball, too much over, that's one you have to kind of figure out yourself. You have to figure out, every player is a little different. I kind of like as a starting point, so the eyes to be kind of right in here at the hosel. That's kind of where it's usually pretty good. You know, often people will say, well, just putt over a spot in front of you. What's interesting is if I get someone to stroke the ball normally, or if I just get them to putt over a spot, their start line is so much better if they just putt over the spot, but that's not really going to help them with their speed control. It's only going to help that one area. So when we're telling players just pick a spot and roll it over, it's very good for short putts, but it might not be good for anything a bit longer because they're not perceiving the target as well. So, and again, here's something a little bit interesting that I found. As with better players, as the player got to impact, the head was starting to move, or the eyes were starting to move out on the target side, almost like they were looking for the ball. So a lot of times people were saying, oh, keep your head still, don't move your head or don't move your eyes. A lot of the better players are noticing that their eyes are actually moving. So they're coming to impact, almost impact, and their eyes start to move towards the target and they're starting to look up. One of the things I tell my players is don't keep your head down when you're putting. Like, don't keep your head down and wait for it. I want you to look right away because I want to know if that ball started on the line. Because our head is tilting this way, it actually makes a lot of sense. If my head was doing this, yeah, I would say keep your head down. But because your head is tilting on the right axis, it's very easy for that to happen. And very useful. You can see here, the one on the left is me at the end of the backstroke. The one on the right is just post impact. And the eye line is starting to move towards the target as if this is where I want to go. The eyes are saying, this is where I want to go. Now, we don't see this with better players. We only see this here, or we don't see this with novice players. We only generally see this with better players. We also see this in snooker and pool. We often see is as they're about to hit the cue ball, their eyes are starting to move onto something further afield, depending on the level of player. If you get a novice, they're just staring at the cue ball. So the better the player, the more the eyes travel. And we've got an interesting one for pitching in the next session. So here's Nelly Korda. She's the current world #1. And what we'll notice here is I measured her stroke, by the way, this day, and it was perfect. Like, I mean, you wouldn't fault it. Absolutely perfect on cap toe, but struggling to miss some putts. So we've just put a tee down out in front there and trying to help her with her aiming and with her perception of where she thinks she's aiming. So starting down the ruler, it's a good one. But what you'll notice over here is you see the way her head is pitched this way. That was throwing off her club face, and her club face was being a little bit open, and then she was just kind of leaving everything a bit out to the right. So I'll show you the second video here on the right. If it plays for me. You can see the way that head has a lot of drift to it, like there's a lot of movement. So that again, like we talked about, the stability in the body and our center of gravity being in the right spot is important. This was a day that she didn't putt well, so it was good to measure. Those are key days for us to learn and see what's going on. You can see that head tilted a little bit that way, leaves the face open, and that's where you get the shoulders and the body. So everything kind of has a knock-on effect. So the head's a little bit this way to compensate, kind of go there, and then everything's kind of thrown off. And then we have those days that we're not really putting that well. So start line, fairly simple things that we could use, like the ruler. The error in our start line is very small. Like, so a good player in the PGA Tour is probably like plus or minus 0.6, 0.7, and a bad stroke is probably only like 1.2, 1.3. So the difference in error is very small for start line. I would say that it's probably something that people practice the most, but probably something that you don't need to practice the most. I think there's benefits, but not a ton of benefits. You can use, a ruler, a little piece of chalk or something out there. That my ruler, my mat has something built in there that we do that because you can do it at home. So what do we like for time? Okay. So what's good speed? So when we talk about speed, I think one of the important things is to understand that as the ball gets faster or it's moving faster towards the hole actually gets a little bit smaller. And because it gets a little bit smaller, then it's harder for you to make the putt. So when you've seen those pictures of Jin Young putting so well, the ball was traveling into the hole at the biggest speed. Now, technically, I'd prefer the player be at least about a foot past. You can see at a foot, the hole is 2.6 inches wide. At 2 feet, it shrinks to 1.9, and at 3 feet, it's about the size of the ball. So technically, if you wanted to have the ball fall into the hole, you would do it at dead weight. Dead weight will give us the biggest hole so that the ball falls in. Anything faster than that will start to go. But realistically, if you go at dead weight, there's more chance of you, unless your speed is excellent, there's more chance of you finishing short of the hole. So we always try to go for about a foot past. If there's some error in there, it'll be a little short or a little long. We still should be in pretty good shape. So capture speed is important when you're trying to help the player improve. We also measure, this is a simple thing you can do, set up a ruler or an alignment rod and look and see how much the ball is jumping and skidding. So you can see that ball was rolling end over end. That's going to then create very good speed control. If the ball was jumping and bouncing, then probably not. The rule of thumb is about 10%. So 10% skid. So the ball will actually launch a little bit and skid, but 10% of the total putt. We're not going to go through too much with the green reading. Got a couple of things. Obviously, fitting the putter is an important factor. But then when we come back to it, it's really boils down to these couple of key points: is, you know, technical skills or performance. You know, those are our key areas that we're looking for here. Obviously, there's a bunch of technical stuff that we did with Jin Young there, but we really tried to do a lot of skill training and a lot of performance training once you kind of got the hang of the setup. Okay. So this is just something that we see when we're looking at players here. So, you know, a lot of them, their confidence is tied to their performance. So if we train the performance enough and help them understand it, we can start to build sort of the right type of player and the right type of mindset that knows that what they need to do under pressure to perform well. You know, things that we see, like we said, low self-esteem, afraid of failure and success, you know, people getting embarrassed, you know, often blaming people, you know, they'll often say, oh, I can't get to the next level, and their self-talk. So those are times that we need to be training the performance so much more so that the player has the tools and understanding. Like, obviously we've got to build confidence in players, but we've also got to make them accountable so that they don't blame other people or say, oh, I didn't play well because of X, Y, or Z. You know, at the end of the day, it comes down to the player. If they didn't play well, it has to be on them and the work that they're doing. You know, so I think when we talk about performance, we have to think about these things. You know, can we improve the player's self-esteem? Can we, you know, people are so afraid of failing. What I would rather have them is failing more. If you can get them to fail more, the chances of them performing well is higher, you know? So don't be afraid of failure, because failure just leads the player to another step. What do we like? We're a little bit behind on time. Do we have any questions about any of that there that we hammered through?
Yeah, let's see. There's one about fitting the putter for different players, model length, grip. How would you do it, or any thoughts on that side?
Yeah. So I think one of the simplest things is if you just get a player and just get them to stand comfortably, put their hands together like they're praying, and just stand comfortably, elbows just slightly tucked into their side, just slightly, get into a comfortable position. What we can do is we can measure from the ground to the wrist angle there and get the length of the putter. That's probably one of the biggest things. The next thing I would do is I would do an aiming test. So if you get putters with different markings, different lines, a dot, double lines, a mallet, and you just set up a tee, you know, and just get them to line up with all the different markings, you're going to be able to test which putter alignment on the putter allows them to actually aim the putter the best. What you'll often see is that players will gravitate to one shape, one head, one neck, and one alignment aid, and that there will basically be the one that you're looking for, you know. And what you'll do is I just, like I said, I set them up. I'll say, okay, I've got a ruler or something lined up, or I've got a little T-square here, and I put my mark down, like, does it look like you're aiming there? And they're like, no, or yes. And you kind of just go through a series of different putters to see which alignment that they like. Now, you might need to jump in and move their head or move them a little bit, but if you're just doing a plain fitting without any instruction, that's how I would do it. The toe hang of the putter. So if you think about it this way, if the player misses left, you want to have a putter that's got more toe hang, because if there's more weight here, the putter takes longer to close. So if it's toe heavy and the player misses left, more toe hang. If the player starts to miss more right, work your way up into something a bit more face balanced, you know? So if you're just holding the putter like this, you can figure out where it is. So you'll notice this is my putter, and it's quite a bit toe down. So my natural tendency is a little bit left. So what I'll do, I built the putter just so it does the work for me. If I went to a mallet that was face balanced, I'd be terrible. I would miss so many putts. But this is an easy way for me to manage that there. Neck has a lot to do with it, different types of neck in terms of where we think we're aiming. So that'll be another little aiming test. So we're obviously doing length. Lie is an easy enough one too. Generally there's 71 degrees there, but if you're a player like Steve Stricker, you know, he likes to have the putter almost toe down, you know, so his lie angle on the putter is going to be more like 75. For me, I'm 5'9", so I'm not super tall, but I like to have the angle of the putter about 74 degrees, so a little bit more upright. Again, I tend to miss a little bit left, so if the putter sits a little bit more toe down, then the strike is a little bit more right of center, so the face has less chance of closing. Again, little biases that we build in there, but the big thing for a player, I would say, is get them the right length. If you're putting on slow greens, 4 to 5 degrees. If you're putting on fast greens, 1 to 2 degrees of loft, I would say. And if you're switching up between summer and fall, you know, then you would probably just adjust the loft on the putter to get to that there. So kind of, again, I think you've got to get something that's the right length and setup so that they're always setting up, that they're not adjusting to the putter. And then the second thing is that when they look down at it, that the aim on the putter matches kind of what they're seeing with their eyes, so that they're going to be a little bit more comfortable with it. Okay.
Yeah. Then there's a couple more. Would you put every player to use the same arc, or do you see that as an individual thing, different putter types, body shape, etc.?
Yeah, totally individualized. I would say that the path of the putter influences the ball by about 10%. So the path only has a small amount of importance. So I wouldn't put too much into it. I'd be more concerned that we strike it in the middle of the face. You know, if I've got something that's like got a huge amount of arc to it, the chance of hitting it in the face is going to be a lot less. If I was putting people into arcs, I'd probably be 12 to 15 degrees arc. So just a very slight arc for me. If we do it through setup, if I have my hands way too far forward, I'm going to create, you know, kind of a large arc. So that's why I like the shoulder and the hands to be in this position, so that I can create just the ever so slightly of an arc. Now, what that does is it creates probably about 4 to 6 degrees of openness on the way back, and then about 4 to 6 degrees of closed on the way through. You know, if I go into more arc, then, you know, I'm into 15 and 15, you know, and then it's much harder to time. So that's why I probably 12 to 15 degrees of swing arc is kind of what I'm looking for, because the face rotation is less, and face rotation is face at impact is about 90% of the ball direction. So I think it's probably got more, it's probably way more important.
Yeah, then your thoughts about cross-handed grip, left hand low, probably.
Very good if your path is too far left. So the path will shift about 3 degrees for a right-handed golfer, about 3 degrees to the right. So if you're a player, or your players tend to miss left, or you see the putter kind of going hard left hand low, very good. Yeah.
Well, just touching the intermediate target kind of thing, like you said, that it's totally different if you're looking at the target or like putting over a marker. What's your opinion about the kind of using intermediate target?
So if you struggle with aim, why not just set up, have your intermediate target, set up, have it, but then look up to the hole. I would say don't spend any more time looking at it, because when you're looking at something a foot in front of you, you're not getting the benefits of looking at the hole and interpreting the right speed into the hole.
Yeah.
So then if your speed isn't quite right, your start line is not going to be that far off, to be honest with you. But using it as a guide to start is fine.
Yeah. Especially using it for aim.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But not getting so focused just on that one spot, because it takes away from some of the other skills that we want to grow.
Yeah, I think that's it. Any more questions from people listening? Or and I think we can we discussed that we do a kind of a Q&A afterwards, after the second one as well. So with anything that comes into mind, like the topics you kind of have to run through a little bit quickly. So if there's anything coming up in the few days following or after the second one, so then just
yeah, absolutely. Like I think the follow-up, once we've done these 2 sessions, the follow-up after that will just be a chance for us to go and throw a bunch of questions and go through things that you want to know a bit more about.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Gareth. I think it was really great, and time went fast. So
I know. And you know what? When we go back and we do that 1 hour, I've actually got more stuff. I have about 15 more slides of stuff that I will condense a little bit, and I'll try and put some of that together.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's let's see. Jussi has a comment. Well, thank you very much for your time, Gareth, from Jussi as well. So
no problem. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody for the short game one. And then, like I said, we'll do one follow-up after that there, where we can just get on and chat. And if I can answer questions about anything, I'll do my best to help you guys out as much as I can.
Yeah. So the short game one will be on January 11th, same time of the day, and I will send the invitation out tomorrow for all the members. So just to heads up for all of you. So, but once again, thank you very much, Gareth, and enjoy your day over there. We're turning into evening and the darkness continues.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll take care, and thank you for everybody for showing up today.
Thank you very much.